Hi, I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, unrest in Indonesia's West Papua has led to renewed calls for an independent state. Should the area remain part of Indonesia?
We want to hear your questions and thoughts on this. Tweet them to us at AJ Stream or comment in our live YouTube chat.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Park. I'm the president of the Harvard Asian American Alumni Alliance, and you are in the stream.
On Thursday, Indonesia partially lifted an internet blackout in the country's easternmost region of West Papua. The restriction was imposed after some of the most serious civil unrest in years. Protests began in mid-August after the spread of a video showing Indonesian security forces calling Papuan students monkeys. Demonstrations have now turned into renewed calls for an independent state. Protesters have marched with the banned Morning Star flag, a symbol of the West Papuan independence movement. And across the West Papua region, government buildings have been set on fire. Around 6,000 police and military reinforcements have been sent. Last week, witnesses said at least 6 demonstrators and 1 soldier were killed in Papua province, but the government denies the incident took place.
So today we want to look into what's happening now in West Papua and what should be done to resolve tensions between the region and the Indonesian government. We'll hear Papuan perspectives in a bit, but first let's go to Ottawa, where we're joined by Abdulkader Jailani, Indonesia's ambassador to Canada. Welcome.
Ambassador, it's good to have you. I'm going to start with a map because the West Papua is not in the news very often. I want to remind our international audience where it is. I'm going to show the map. In the deep red colour, you will see the area that's known as the West Papuan region. The orange area is the rest of Indonesia. You'll notice that Surabaya is marked out there. That's a place where that original incident of the monkey name calling happened. And then the other areas that we have marked are areas where there have been big protests and also areas where there's been a limited amount of connectivity with people's mobile phones and the internet. Ambassador, I'm going to go first of all to your president. This is him about 2 weeks ago on what was happening in the West Papuan region. Have a listen.
Saya juga telah memerintahkan kepada Kapolri.
Thank God, the situation is back to normal again and an apology has been issued. This shows the greatness of our hearts that stand united together and the mutual respect and value we have for each other as fellow countrymen and citizens.
Ini tolong digarisbawahi. Saya juga akan mengundang.
I already have ordered the police chief to take legal action against racial and ethnic discrimination in a strict manner, and please take note of this. I will also invite leaders from Papua and West Papua, traditional leaders, community leaders, and religious leaders to come to the presidential palace to talk about the acceleration of welfare in Papua.
Ambassador, your president there saying, thank God the situation is back to normal again. That was 2 weeks ago. Maybe he was being a little bit too optimistic. How would you describe the situation today?
Yeah, the information that we got from on the ground that the condition now is improving. But yeah, I know it's not perfect yet. But I think we are very optimistic that we can restore the situation and the security.
Optimistic, but I want to bring this in. This tweeted from Virginia, really sharing something that came out of the UN. This from the UN's Human Rights Chief, Michelle Bachelet. We are seeing an outpouring of popular discontent and mass protests, or their suppression with the firm hand of the state, listing Indonesia's Papua province among regions where dialogue is needed to prevent unrest. How did it get to this point, Ambassador?
Yeah, we know that the situation in Papua is not perfect yet as of today, but as I'm telling you that now we are improving. Of course, there are some area that we need to do. We need to restore that. And the second thing is about the dialogue. I think it is clear from the statement made by our president that we are willing to dialogue with all the community leaders, with local leaders. So it sends a strong message that Indonesian government is very willing to listen all the aspiration and all the wishes of the Papuan people.
One of the things that you do as your job is to explain Indonesia to the rest of the world. We still are very curious about how did we get to the situation where police are calling West Papuans monkeys, where West Papuans are protesting, and you're in a situation where you need to have dialogue with your own citizens. I'm still not clear. how that started from your perspective, Ambassador.
There is one thing that we must be bear in mind. You know what happened? We never condone what happened in Surabaya. As such, racial slur is unacceptable. And the statement made, what happened in Surabaya does not only hurt or hurt the feeling of the Papuans, but the whole Indonesian as a one nation. The such statement, it is indeed an expression that will be against our principle as being Indonesian.
There's clearly grievances there, and I wanted to share this video. You'll just see scenes. This is from the Twitter account Free West Papua. Incredible scenes in Jayapura, West Papua, as the Indonesian flag is torn down and the West Papuan flag, the Morning Star, is raised. Thousands of people can be seen below chanting for freedom. So you see those scenes right there. And then I want to switch over here to YouTube, where someone with that handle, Morning Star, writes in and they say, should Australia rule Hong Kong because they had the same colonial master? Papua and Indonesia have nothing in common except the same colonial masters. It's racism to support this nonsense, and that is referencing the idea of the question, should Papua remain part of Indonesia? Clearly there are grievances here. Clearly there are people who are upset. What would you say to people who say there needs to be a referendum on independence?
One thing that we need to remember that Indonesia, Papua is since the very beginning, and it's always remains part of our Indonesia. The fact that the Papua is a part of our territory, it is based on international law. It is justified by international law. There is a principle of oti possidetis principle. So such a statement as that the Hong Kong and Australia ruled by the same master, it is just a twisting a statement. Once again, that Papua is a part of our territory is justified by international law. This is the first thing. The second thing is all the self-determination has been internally and externally exercised.
Ambassador Abdul Qadir Jilani, thank you so much for joining us on the stream today. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we want to move on to share more perspectives on West Papua, so we are joined by Benny Wenda, Chairman of the United Liberation Movement for West Papua. He joins us from Oxford in the UK. In Yogyakarta, Indonesia, Yeni Wahid, Executive Director of the Wahid Institute, a group that campaigns for religious freedom. And in Melbourne, Australia, Victor Mambor, a journalist based in Jayapura, West Papua. Thank you very much for joining us. Malike.
So eager to get in our community in this because we got a couple of video comments from people, and I want to share just one of them, giving an insight into some of the grievances that people are sharing. And we tried to ask the ambassador there what led to this. We didn't quite get that answer. So Benny, I'm going to share this from Ligia Gay. She's a PhD candidate at Murdoch University, and here are the grievances from her perspective.
The racist tones towards Papuan students in Surabaya is not an isolated incident. This is something that has occurred for decades. Papuan students studying outside of Papua for the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, they've always had stories about how they're called monkeys. And this, of course, also has impacted our football players who also have been called monkeys when they're playing in the field in outside of Papua. There is this one incident where a banana peel was actually thrown into the field.
So Benny, you can hear some of the hurt in her voice there. Can you describe for us what it's like to be Papuan in Indonesia?
58 years, we've been under suppressed by Indonesia illegal occupation. As Ambassador said that West Papua is part of the Indonesia, but not. West Papua never part of Indonesia. We've been separate. We are different geographically, culturally, linguistically. We have never been part of Indonesia. That's why they call us a monkey from the beginning. Since they illegally occupied our country, 1963, since then, a blasted beginning. 500,000 men, women has been killed up to now. So Indonesia ambassador He claimed that West Papua part of Indonesia. Never. West Papua never part of Indonesia. 20 years we separate. Indonesia got independent in 1945. West Papua never part of Indonesia. We are called Dutch New Guinea. That's why Dutch gave us independence. 1961, 62, 63 Indonesia illegally occupied. That's why that's the beginning of the massacre up to now. So Indonesia claim over West Papua is illegal. So this killing is continued, rape, torture, imprisonment. People just coming out in the street peacefully. We demand our right to self-determination denial. 1969. Indonesia and big power call act of free choice. We call act of no choice. That is why Wiranto claimed that, New York Agreement, 66, New York Agreement, 15 of August 1962.
So Benny, remember, we're bringing the international community up to date with a story that, as you have shown, goes back for many, many decades. Yenny, please jump in here, because what Benny is saying is that we don't even belong to Indonesia. You have no claim over us. This is the root of the issue.
Yeah, I think if you want to look at the roots of the issue of Papua, I think it's simplifying the issue of just boxing it into an issue of human rights violations. There are many structural issues that happening in Papua, and that has led to dissatisfactions and grievances that many are feeling up to this day. I think the process, the integration process, is not yet. The process is not finished yet, and there are many things that the central government of Indonesia should have done better to integrate the Papuans more into the society. But I would say that... I don't understand.
Yenny, I'm so sorry. You're teaching me a lot of things today as well. I don't understand what integration means in the context of Indonesia and the West Papuan region. Can you give us an example?
Yes. What Benny mentioned before about the New York Agreement that happened in 1969, basically that granted Indonesia's... Papua belongs to Indonesia, it's part of Indonesia. And it's recognized by UN resolution.
It's never part of Indonesia. You are wrong.
It is recognized by. No. It's recognized by 93 countries.
1960
by UN resolution.
The referendum was only took the note. United Nations only took the note. Africa, Caribbean country rejected your claim.
There are about 30 African countries.
So here you're hearing,
but majority of countries,
Yenny and Benny, this is a perfect example of why there is a dispute in Indonesia right now, because we're hearing the claim and the counterclaim here.
Problem is
I was just very curious if you could give me one example, and Yenny now quickly, about what you meant by integration.
Yes. Since Papua became part of Indonesia, then there's a problem with building more of Papua regions. There are problems that is happening there, but it's not just because of the way Jakarta mishandles the issue there, but it's also due to an issue of development, an issue of lack of transparency, issue of not very good governance there in Papua, which is actually done by the Papuan themselves. So it's a very complex issues. And Papua is actually has a special autonomy granted to them, which is not enjoyed by other provinces in Indonesia. Basically, the special autonomy grants Papuans greater privileges. For example, only Papuans can run for office in Papua, but also that they can also run for office in other provinces in Indonesia, and even for the highest position in Indonesia. For example, if they want to run for president.
How many people you've been killed? Amnesty International last year, they published almost half of the 1,000 been killed under the special autonomy. What are you talking about that? Is you killing more than more than now?
Benny, can I just
not asking development.
Can I just say that there is a problem of violence? There is a cycle of violence that's happening in Papua, but
your government
not only carried through.
So Yenny and Benny, I'm just going to ask you for a pause for a moment. Yenny and Benny, I'm going to ask you for a pause for a moment. Victor, I hear you. Just hold tight for a second. Malika, where do you want to take us now?
Oh, Victor, I see you trying to get in there, and I want to bring you in via a couple of comments here, because there are voices that people online are telling us that we're not hearing, and that is because the Indonesian government enacted a shutdown of data, for the most part, and internet data. And so it's been hard to get those voices out. This is what one person on Twitter says. He says, this means that we aren't able to verify facts. It means there was the chance of more fake news getting out of hand. Indonesia handled this all wrong, all because they were desperate for control. So that's one person's perspective. But then news broke just today, this from Stephen, who says Indonesia has partially lifted an internet blackout. So we can see that there. And this, of course, was on data. That's what's being reported. But Victor, you are a journalist based there in the West Papua region. Talk to us about what people there felt and what voices we're not hearing because of this blackout.
Yeah, I want to talk about when Yeni talk about the special autonomy law in West Papua. There's a part of the internet blackout is a part of the misunderstanding of the special autonomy law. I mean, why the Indonesian government shut down the internet in West Papua? We should have a same treatment by Indonesian government. I think for our experience when the internet's shut down, we cannot verify any information come from grassroots. That's a problem for us. It's not only to verifying but also to work because we are based in online. Yeah. So what the people said in Twitter is, I think it's very true. There's so when we going back before 2 weeks ago, all of the information come from the government, and we want to, we're working very hard to have to deliver the information from West Papua because no more West Papuan media who wrote or who published the story about West Papua. There's only some media like us and Suara Papua, but it's very hard.
Okay.
To be honest, I still think it's very
not easy
hard
to be a
to work in
journalist.
West Papua.
Okay.
Not only to be a journalist, but also to work for a news.
Let me just move on a little bit. I want to show our audience Benny's Twitter page and the Twitter profile. He calls himself a West Papua independence leader. This is really important in the context of this conversation because after this violence, the complaints about discrimination, Benny, you've been asking and been pushing for independence of West Papua region for a very long time. Does this latest series of protests, does that mean that you're closer to independence than ever before?
I'm confident that this is the time to, it's changed now because, world is finding out, world is watching what's happening in West Papua because the last 50 years, Indonesia banned journalists, Amnesty International, Red Cross, International Peace Brigade. So that's why now world is finding out because Indonesia stigmatized my people as monkey. I think that sentiment collectively come out peacefully last 2 weeks. Then what happened? Indonesia started shooting DI. 6 people were killed by Indonesian military and police. That is what happening. There is also the militia group created by Wiranto himself because Wiranto was in East Timor. He's a war crime wanted by United Nations. Now he's personal attacking me and him and this general. So we talk about the situation in West Papua, bring the peace, only to bring the peace, give the people of West Papua.
So Benny, if I could just share,
that's our asking.
You're talking about Minister Wiranto, he's the security minister. Let me just share with our audience one of the most recent things that he said that was of great importance to this debate. Have a look.
The Papua police chief banned demonstrations that will lead to anarchy. Any individuals or organisations are prohibited from carrying out or spreading separatism or expressing opinions in public and violations that will cause separatism. There is no nation in this world that doesn't have an issue with separatism. It's inevitable. There will always be a group in a country that holds sentiments different from the majority of the people. It also happens in Indonesia, and not just here in Papua. It could be anywhere else. That is exactly why we must fight and neutralize.
Yeni, if the feeling in Indonesia for an appetite for a referendum, would you say there is one?
You know, first of all, I can feel Benny's pain when he talked about the racial slur. And I think this is a pain that's not only felt by the Papuans, but the whole Indonesians. I mean, there's so many supports and sympathy expressed towards the Papuans, you know.
No, I'm sorry.
But
It's a sympathy
Sorry,
belief, yeah?
sorry?
Allow
Okay,
Yeni to finish
so-
her sentence. Just allow her to finish her thought, and then you can interject.
But
Yeni, finish your thought.
Okay. So, but diverse ethnic groups doesn't mean that they cannot live in harmony. It's just what we need is a political process. So, I mean, take United States, for example. We've got diverse groups of people from different ethnicities and backgrounds that can coexist peacefully. And I think this is the approach that we need to push for. More dialogue, more listening to one another, and actually a common ground, you know. And I think the common ground for us, for me and Benny, is actually that we both want the best for the Papuans. We want prosperity for the Papuans. We want, a democracy for Papuans. And I think the way to do that is to listen to one another. And for me,
The problem is you illegally occupied our country. That's why you start killing us. That's why your government calling us monkey. You cannot
the killing,
just
unfortunately, the killing,
democracy. No. When you start
unfortunately, the
calling
killing
us
is not
monkey,
just
then
happened.
that's
It's not just being
separate.
perpetrated. Unfortunately, the killing is
tell your
not just
government that
perpetrated
the time
by
for hold a
the Indonesian
referendum
government.
is when
Benny.
we talk
Also,
about dialogue,
Yeni.
it never happened.
We're trying to hear both of you. Let me
So-
just give a pause in the conversation so Malika can get in there. Malika, go ahead.
So I hear both of your perspectives. I wanted to bring this in, this from Twitter. Elder says if Indonesia allowed Papuans to vote on their freedom, it could end the protests tomorrow. But Jakarta knows that West Papua would immediately vote to have their freedom back. So keeping that in mind, I want to play a video comment from someone who sent us his thoughts. This is Victor, who's an international spokesperson of the National Committee for West Papua. And here's his take.
West Papua is last colony in Pacific. West Papua still fighting for the right of self-determination from colonialism of Indonesia. We have been treated like animal. Discrimination is still going on, and we have become minority in our own land. That is why people of West Papua still continue to fighting for the right of self-determination. So we need Indonesia to bring the case of West Papua back to the United Nations. We need United Nations supervised referendum in West Papua. That's the best solution for the people of West Papua.
Yani, you're the daughter of the fourth president of Indonesia, Abdurrahman Wahid. Do you think his legacy, he had high approval ratings in this region, do you think that legacy is carrying on? And what should happen to make that happen?
Well, I think like what I proposed before, that we should push for more dialogue, peaceful dialogues. And along with that, we should also improve service delivery to the Papuans. One of the problems in Papua is actually there's this cycle of violence that's happening now. It's not just done by the Indonesian military, like what Benny suggested, but also done by the armed civilian groups there, the pro-independence movements. There were cases in which many civilians were killed, and it's also cases of violence between tribes there. We must know also, we must understand also, we try to understand the Papua conflict. We also need to understand that Papua is very diverse.
So Yeni,
there
you've
are
given
about
us
257 tribal groups there, and they have their own
So Yeni,
languages and customs, and
Yeni,
they actually cannot speak
Yeni
one
has
another.
selective
Sorry.
hearing all of a sudden. Yeni, Benny, Victor, you've given us insight into a very complicated situation in Western Papua province. We really appreciate you helping us to understand this story a lot better. Thank you very much. Malika and I will always see you online at AJ Stream on Twitter. See you next time.